In the early parts of Shadow Magic, one of the biggest problems that I had was just moving data. How do I get 50 terabytes from New York back to Los Angeles? I realized at the sort of tech level, I could use object storage itself as my conduit. So I could upload things to the infrastructure, the object storage itself, and then just download it on the other side. It's like that was the sort of epiphany of like, there's this thing that's available to everyone. There's a technical shift happening in the industry that was really exploded as a result of the pandemic. The idea of everyone going into the same office to do the work was overnight kind of like the old way of doing things. And that opened up a lot of possibilities. What if I'm not paying for the HVAC? What if I'm not paying for, for the server room? What if I'm not paying for the fridge full of LaCroix or the accoutrement of the facility? How could I take that studio level offering of service, bring it to independent filmmakers, who are trying to save every dollar and put the money on the screen? How can I offer them something that's extremely high value and also, half the price that they're used to? I believe that independent films are where culture is made. That's who I want to get in the trenches with. The people who say, I mortgaged my house to make my passion project.
All right, well, welcome back to the Post-Production Club podcast. Today, we are talking with Jordan Maltby of Shadow Magic Studios. It's a little bit of a unique and different episode than what we typically do. We're not going to be talking about a specific show or movie, but I get to talk with Jordan. He's a former editor from Warner Brothers Animation and has a long, just track record in the Hollywood post-production industry. He's actually started a new studio called Shadow Magic, where they're launching new post-production workflows that are really interesting. I run this podcast to get to talk with people that are, in the post-production industry and get to hear how they're working on cool stories and films and stuff. But I want to keep highlighting the ways that we're also innovating in this industry as well. And as I'm running Vogue Studios, which is a post-production company, I'm trying to find ways of how we can continue to innovate and move forward and, really build Vogue 2.0, as I like to say, to really create the post-production house of the future. And Jordan's doing that in a really big way with Shadow Magic Studios, alongside of a company called StoreJ, which is a cloud-based company that is where all of these new post-production products are living. So it's very nerdy talk, but it's really cool to hear how he's thinking and about the future of post-production, where things are going, the ways that he's solving a ton of problems for editors and productions right now. And instead of having to work all under one house, under one building located, you can have people all over the globe. And as the industry continues to globalize and productions are going all international, that means that they've only increased globally. And so as editors in the US and outside of are looking to stay up to date and on the cutting edge, Jordan's going to have a lot of really good things to say about that. And so I would just say, we talk about a lot of products, nerdy workflows, use this as a jumping off point to go, whoa, how can I learn more about this and really start to look into it. So yeah, excited you guys to hear about it, and let's dive in. Well, it's good to have you on here, Jordan. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
For sure. My name is Jordan Maltby. I'm the CEO of Shadow Magic Studios, and also the makers of Beam Transfer and a bunch of other things. We make movies.
It's awesome. I, caught wind of you and was really intrigued by all the things that you have going on and the vision that you have for movie making for the future. I set out to build Vogue Studios, which is, our mission is to really become the post house of the future. And in the, endeavor of reaching that vision and becoming that, you came across my path and was like, I got to talk with this guy because he is doing that. And he is equipping, creators, editors, post houses, studios with the ability to solve a lot of problems and be very modern in how we approach some of these problems. So I'll quit talking in vague generalities and would love for you to kind of just go, maybe we could start at a high level, talk about what Magic Studios does, and then go from there.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for such a warm intro. So yeah, Shadow Magic Studios actually started pretty humbly. Basically, I was an editor and realized that I didn't want to be a career editor on as a career assistant editor on Marvel movies for the rest of my life. Like I wanted to actually get in the trenches on independent films. That's why I got into this industry. I believe that independent films are where culture is made. I love new and original thoughts and ideas and the creativity that comes with it. But just economically, as an editor, it wasn't. It was kind of tough. So I had the pleasure of working with the Chionis when they were creating Light Iron and opening Light Iron New York, and I saw how they were doing some of the innovations on the camera to editorial pipeline. And starting around the time of the pandemic, I started thinking, oh my God, everything's going remote. Maybe I can take some of these skills that I've learned in the digital lab services industry business, which is also where a lot of independent films get, for lack of a better term, screwed. In terms of like you mess up one thing in dailies and suddenly your conform is an extra $10,000, right? So I was like, what if I could take that and use it as more or less like a side gig for my editing career. And well, then you quickly realize, well, you can't be everywhere all at once. So we're going to have to do this remote. So instead of physically being at a location, we would ship a rig to their production office and then control it remotely. And sort of what I thought was a little bit of a side hustle has grown such that now we're doing 5 or 6 shows at the same time, and we're growing that operation. So that's everything from dailies to archive to LTO. We built the entire operation using cloud technology. So the money goes. We like to say that the money goes on screen instead of to a fridge full of LaCroix, right? And then we've actually since expanded beyond that through what we call post management, which is kind of like solving that problem of the post supervisor who comes in too late and leaves too early. So it's kind of like a post supervisor as a service that comes in deep in pre-production and goes all the way through to legal delivery. And then we've expanded even from there as well, partnering up with my partners at Gaten Corcus and Houston Jones to actually create a full holistic script-to-screen production company. So we develop projects, we provide production services, and we carry that all the way through post and using our lab services. So we kind of function as like an independent studio in a sense.
That's awesome. Talk to me more about the problem that you were facing that inspired you to need to make this jump and this risky, going all in on an endeavor like this. What inspired you to make that jump?
I'd be lying if I didn't say some part of it was like economic necessity.
Yeah.
Like this, as we all know, this industry is very tumultuous right now. It's going through lots of up and downs. I think the other part of it was I am deeply passionate about independent films and independent filmmaking. Not that I'm this connoisseur of cinema in the universe, but I really, really like the people who say, I mortgaged my house to make my passion project. And it's that's who I want to get in the trenches with. And those are the kind of things I want to make. So there's a passion side. And then obviously there's I saw a good opportunity for a business. I also think that there's a, how would you say, a technical shift sort of happening in the industry that was really exploded as a result of the pandemic, where things really did become really remote. The idea of everyone going into the same office to do the same, to do the work was overnight kind of like the old way of doing things. Mm-hmm. And that opened up a lot of possibilities. Well, what if I'm not paying for the HVAC? What if I'm not paying for, for the server room? What if I'm not paying for the, the fridge full of LaCroix or the accoutrement of the facility? What could I offer? How could I take that studio level offering of service, bring it to independent filmmakers, who are trying to save every dollar and put the money on the screen? How can I offer them something that's extremely high value and also, half the price that they're used to, and forge a more interesting relationship in getting those new and interesting films created? So I did a lot of research into cloud technology. I actually give you this is actually kind of a funny story. I was not a hugely techie person. I understood enough of media workflow, but when you talked to me about S3 compatible object storage or something like that, I didn't know anything. But another interesting thing that happened during the pandemic, which was really cool, which was the meetings that you would normally take in person, you could now take on a Zoom call, right? Which means that if I go to any company that I thought was interesting, I could set up a sales call with them. And because they think they're getting a sale, I'll just ask them every question and they will teach me everything about cloud technology. They'll teach me
Dude,
competitors. Then I'll call all of them. They'll teach me, oh, so how does yours work and how are you different than this? They'll stay on the phone for you for an hour and a half and they'll give you a
totally.
master class. So I literally just like did that for like a year. And suddenly I was like, oh, I guess Jordan's a cloud expert now. And so it was out of necessity, but it was really out of like, we need to make this efficient. We can't just go off, buy the off the rack enterprise tool. We're too small for that. We need to be lean. We need to be efficient. We need to be non-techie. We need to have things that just work. And so through that sort of process, we created a mechanism in which, all of our labs are either done at the point of capture with a remote rig, and or using cloud technology and built in our cloud environment. And as a secondary to that, I do tend to ramble a little bit, so forgive me. As a secondary to that, we got to go to a lot of editors and people who were really struggling, and say like, hey, you want to make a few extra bucks? Let me train you as a dailies operator. You just have to jump into this machine for like an hour and a half a day. So we were able to sort of build up a global workforce while also having a providing better service to independent filmmakers.
That's so cool. I love how you were just going after it and gleaning as much information as you could from these other companies in such a stealth mode type of way. And then coming up with an idea, executing on it to something that's not only providing you with more economic viability and giving you like closer to what you're visioning for your life, but also others, like bringing editors into the 21st century and finding ways for us to continue to work better, faster.
It's a funny thing about the film industry, because I like to say that it's the most selfish, selfless industry, right? It's like, even whether you're a creative and it's like, this is my vision, this is my thing, until it becomes the audience's, and then it's not yours anymore. And I think there's a similar thing in the way that we work together. Everyone's trying to survive, everyone's trying to eat, but there's also kind of like a cooperative thing of like, what if I can help them make this film better? What if I can help this person do their job better? And have more time to be creative and stuff like that. And I get really excited about stuff like that.
Same, which is why we're talking. And so I want to like do a deep dive, because I think not a lot of people, myself included, up until being introduced to you, knew what options are out there and what you've done with Shadow Magic. So you have this thing called the Magic Box, which is what you've been referring to thus far. But give us like a 5th grade level of what it does and what problem it solves.
The 5th grade level is we bring the lab to you. And as simple as it is as simple as it sounds, or maybe it's the opposite. Basically, the Magic Box is a Mac computer, a backup battery, and depending on the show, some card readers. And that's it. It just flies in a flight case, and it's been pre-configured. So I'll get on the phone with a PA, and they'll be like, "Okay, we just received the shipment. What do I do?" And I'm like, "Well, you plug it into power. Okay, cool, done that. Plug it into the internet. Okay, done that. Open the laptop. All right, you're done." And then from there, it's like we have control over the box. And then a DIT will hand off a shuttle drive to a PA at the end of the day, and they'll basically plug it into the box and then leave it completely unattended. And then from there, our operators come in and we'll do everything from basically a full dailies pipeline. So everything from syncing to QC to color matching to quarter frame slipping, like all the things that you'd imagine that would happen at like a proper dailies lab. It just happens at the point of capture. So you don't have to get a Teamster to work overtime to ship it into the after hours check-in of the lab that's 50 miles away, right? Everything happens in your production office. And so the turnaround is very, very fast. What you get from there, from an editor's perspective, is you get if it's an Avid show, you get an Avid bin with everything already synced, already named, already color graded, already QC'd, and you get a point of contact bridging the editorial department with production. And then we'll also make a set of web dailies, for review. That'll have your watermark and your burn in and all that kind of stuff. And we will offer that to infinite number of users, infinite number of storage, completely for free. So it's basically everything that you'd imagine that you'd get at a Light Iron or a Company 3 or something like that, but it happens in your production office remotely.
And was there nothing like this that existed out there? Like, when you were starting to make this, what did you find that was already out there, and why didn't it like provide what you needed?
Not really. There were some bigger labs who were trying to survive the pandemic, who built kind of like mobile rigs, but they built like, something that you put in a crate and crate ship, like they built like this really techie thing, and they're still charging as if you went into the facility. So it wasn't really the same. No one that I could find had really done this for independent films. And if they did, it was kind of sort of regional. Because we're like actually remote and the rigs can ship, we can go to every tax haven state. We can go international. In fact, like I'm a West Coast guy, and I'd say 60% of our work is on the East Coast. You
Okay.
know, so not really. It was something. I think it was kind of like a hole in the market, so to speak. And I think we just found an opportunity.
So a lot with this is it's serving larger productions. They're still indie, but they're outside of your kind of like typical quick turn, lean and mean production where you have just a couple people. You could still have this, I'm sure, but it might be a little bit like overkill. So I'm curious, just from the research I've done, this isn't your only thing that you've created for like ushering in this new era of remote capabilities for people that are in post. And you're not going after just these kind of like larger indie productions. You've got other things, and I want to hear about that. Like, so tell me about like what you guys have that is like for maybe the smaller post house that's doing more social content, like Vogue, or smaller commercials and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. You're right. Shadow Magic's main target on the digital lab services side is mostly independent films in the like tier 1 to 2 range. So budget ranges from like I'd say as low as 6 to 800,000 and up to like 20 million. So like it's a pretty wide range. I'd say that the vast majority of films we get are in the like 4 to 10 range in terms of budget. In terms of content creators, we have another startup called Beam Transfer. It's not really the focus of this chat, but I'm happy to go into it. So we have a new high-speed large media file transfer service that we actually built on top of the StorageA network, one of our technology partners. And that allows you to send files anywhere in the world at up to 10 gig speeds with multiple share links with permissions. Like it's kind of like a mix of, for the layman, it's kind of like what if Massive, Signiant, and Dropbox had a love child, and it was all working with open and flexible object storage that was compatible with everything else if you were an advanced user. So that you can get off the rack, and it's just 10 cents per gig transfers and $10 per terabyte of unlimited storage. So we just released that as public beta, and I'd be happy to share that with your audience as well. We're accepting our beta testers a few at a time right now, but that'll be public very soon.
Nice. And that's specifically for file transfer only, not like a review and long-term storage solution.
There's more exciting things coming down the pike. Right now, it's a really awesome and flexible high speed file transfer tool that also functions as your long term archive. So you can basically, for techie people out there, it treats object storage like a file system. For untechie people, you just use it like it's Dropbox essentially, and you'll be able to send and receive files anywhere in the world, up to 10 gig, so 1.18 gigabytes per second bidirectionally globally, up to whatever your line speed is. That's tested on Mac. On Windows, it'll actually go up to, I think, 25 gig and beyond. So it's hyper fast, hyper accelerated, simple pay as you go, simple buy-in, really awesome tool that, you can do things like I can give your editor a download link, give the DIT an upload link, and everything will be archived in flight as it's being transferred, things like that. And then there will be more, I won't say too much, but things of like what you are saying coming soon.
That is awesome. So then you have the Magic Box, and that was called Beam Transfer.
Yes.
So then how does that kind of differ from the Magic Cloud solution that you offer?
Magic Cloud is what is a term we use for our sort of internal cloud architecture. Beam will be a conduit to get things to and from it,
Gotcha.
but also open to everyone else. So Shadow Magic Cloud, has our cloud archive, our long-term cloud archive for our projects. It also has compute in the cloud. So like, for example, we can do things like visual effects pulls and DCP creation, IMF creation, and things like that. This is actually a big deal for indie filmmakers. Like DCPs, for example, you go to a major lab, they can charge you $3,500, $5,000. I've seen up to $9,000 just to make like a festival screener, right? Which is absurd price gouging. Like I'm insulted. So like, we charge $500, really simple.
Wow.
And all of that stuff is done in the cloud. So it also means, like, for example, when you do things like visual effects pulls, what typically happens is you call the lab, the dailies producer CCs the IO department, the transfer department, the archive department, the editorial department, and your grandmother. They get your EDL, they chop it up, and you're lucky to get them like 2.5 weeks later. Right. With Magic Cloud, because everything is cloud-based, we can often turn around hundreds of shots in just a few hours. So everything is based on being really, really efficient, lean, mean, and with the filmmaker first.
So talk to me about how you went from non-techie to where you are now. What does the team look like? It's not just you sitting in a closet pulling all this stuff from the cloud for people.
Yeah. So we have a pretty lean core team. I run most of the, post-production lab stuff. That's my side of the equation. We've got a Mark Steele, who is running our post-management division. And then we have our partners, Akin Korkus and Houston Jones, who run the production side. That's sort of like our core management team. We have a few other people that are sort of joining our ranks as producers for various shows. And then everyone else, we kind of keep a Rolodex and we staff up as we need. So we have a Rolodex of, for example, dailies operators that we know we can call and say like, hey, we have these shows coming up. Are you interested? Usually they're like, heck yeah. So yeah, we want to keep it sort of lean and mean. Obviously we're expanding in both our capabilities and our offerings, but I want to say kind of treat it like a large small business in a sense. Like we want to keep management tight and not like over bloated at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And how did you develop all this stuff, all the software and everything that's coming out?
On the beam transfer side, that was built from the ground up. And I had to learn a whole new way of software development. And, I have a great partner in Pavel Binar, and we started developing it about 1.5 years ago. And that's like its own thing in and of itself. I had to sort of learn that process from scratch. On the Shadow Magic side, I would say it's mostly systems integration rather than invention. And to a certain extent, that's by design. There's a temptation to try to make everything proprietary, but then it means that you need to upkeep and manage it, which is almost like a business in and of itself. What we want to be able to do is be nimble and hot swappable. So if someone creates a better tool, we can just slot that right in, right there. So it's more about thinking about like, how can I create a toolkit, like on the daily side, like our Magic Box comes stacked with like, I think 15 different apps. Some of them are like Screen from Video Village, which is like QuickTime on crack. And we also are big Pomfret fans, and we use SilverStack Lab for our dailies processing. We worked with Pomfret to make sure that certain handoffs from certain apps worked, more seamlessly. I'll give you one like really small example, which is really silly. The ALE workflow into Avid makes perfect sense, and it works really well. The ALE workflow into Premiere doesn't. And it doesn't because there's one space in the text file literally like one space. In Avid, file path is 2 words, and in Premiere, file path is 1 word. And that's the only difference between the two ALEs. So like we had to go through and figure that out. We literally just like built a little like script tool so that we can take the ALE out of Silver Stack and bring it into Premiere. And that workflow works really, really well, but it's really not well documented. Like you have to go into the bowels of Adobe's documentation to figure out the ALE ingest workflow. Part of the problem is how techy do you want me to get?
Very, and then I'm going to ask you to explain it.
Okay, fair enough. So part of the problem with Premiere workflow. So when you're using Avid Op Atoms, right? All of the audio files are separate from the video files, so it fillets them out, and they're actually separate files, which creates a really nice way of relinking audio specifically to WAV files. If you have what's called a muxed QuickTime, which basically means the audio channels are just channels of the QuickTime. When you go to send your XML or AAF to, let's just say, Pro Tools says, "What's the source file?" "Oh, it's something .mov." Right? That doesn't work. So in order to make that work in Premiere, you have to do this fancy ALE workflow where you bring in the ALE, which has the sound roll and the sound time codes already, and then you can relink the files. And then once you do that, then your turnovers will work. So I don't know if I fully answered the question, but it's like there are these little integrations that you had to figure out along the way. So it's not so much like we invented proprietary tools. It's that we learned how to integrate the tools we need, and with a philosophy of if any one thing doesn't work, we can always, or something better comes out, we can always replace it with something better.
I like to attribute it to that style of entrepreneurship and innovation to like the ingredients for an old fashioned always existed.
Right.
Separately, but when it was first combined into that, it was a new cocktail. It was delicious, and that's everything with food and drink and anything that we enjoy. So it's like really cool to see you putting those pieces together from your unique experience as an editor, and then also as a technician, and just bringing those two worlds together in a cool way.
It's honestly very similar to post production in general, or how like even Apple works to some extent. Like they'll take multi-touch from here, and they'll take the hard drive from there. They don't make the hard drive, they don't make the screen, they just put it all together. Similarly in post-production, it's like there is no one app to rule them all, right? There is no editor, color, finish. I mean, DaVinci's kind of trying, but there is no one platform, like the Make Your Movie app, so it is about like, how do I translate this from here to there? How do I get these tools to talk to each other intelligently and work together? I think as editors and post workflow people, we spend a lot of our time figuring out why or how apps talk to each other, and how to manipulate that. Like no one sat down at the beginning of digital filmmaking and said, okay, we're going to have a common database for all timelines, and all bins are going to have the exact same structure. It's like you wrote it in this code with this database, you wrote it in this, and it's all about trying to figure out how to get this to talk to this. And if it doesn't, then you might need to actually flip the app out and use a different tool. So it's kind of the fun part, and at the same time, it's the headache. It's what, in a weird way, it's kind of like what makes you an expert, but at the same time, it's like it really shouldn't have to be this complicated. But little by little, I think we're making things sort of simple. And there's sort of an inverse relationship between. I started that sentence thinking I had something profound, but I'll just say it this way. Like Avid is an amazing tool, and it just works if you give it precisely what it asks for. If you say, this is the Avid workflow. I need this. I need the files to be in this format and this, and you do it. And if you do it exactly that way, everything will work perfectly. Premiere and DaVinci and laterally like Final Cut Pro kind of said, well, why should we have to work that way? Why don't we just make an app that kind of works with everything and can accept any format and whatever? But with that comes a dramatic increase in complexity. And it also means that the way that they have to store the databases and the way they do that stuff becomes more proprietary, becomes less standardized. Not to knock those tools, because I think those tools are great. But it's just to say that, Pro Tools is an Avid product. And so no matter what tool you're using, if you're going to finish in Pro Tools, something has to be able to communicate with it, right? So a lot of the fun is, trying to figure out all that stuff and make it seamless.
Fun to you, I think not fun to a lot of other people. And that's why we need people like you bringing those ingredients together. So what advice would you give to maybe like someone like me or someone else running maybe a small production company or a post house that's looking to really like create the workflow of the future that eliminates a lot of issues? What issues are there that we're currently dealing with? And yeah, what advice would you give to someone to like fix those and set those up correctly?
I'd say probably the cheesy answer is knowledge is power, even though it's true. But the flip side of that is there's the why should I have to deal with that element, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like, we were talking about, things moving to the cloud and that being a new trend. I figured out that I could use cloud object storage instead of using a dedicated platform for a lot of things. I could use it directly. Now that requires knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Can you explain that even?
Yeah, for sure.
The difference between those?
So most people think about most people's communication with the cloud is through a platform like a Frame.io or a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something like that. When they think of the cloud, they think I uploaded this to Frame.io and that's the cloud. Frame.io is a application. It's a platform that connects to some hard drive somewhere that's storing that data. And that hard drive is usually what's referred to as cloud object storage. This gets a little techie, but object storage was sort of created by AWS in what they call S3 or simple storage solution. And for all intents and purposes, it is not just simple, it's pretty much dumb. Like they literally call it buckets because you take a bunch of files and you throw it in the bucket. There's no compute attached to it, which means there's no file system. There's no folders. There's nothing that makes it intelligible to a person. So what apps like Frame.io will do is they'll create a file system on top of it and then reference those files in place. Now, because they're providing that, they can mark up their cost of service quite dramatically, right? Because now they're offering you a solution, not just a piece of infrastructure. So in the early parts of Shadow Magic, one of the biggest problems that I had was just moving data. How do I get 50 terabytes from New York back to Los Angeles, right? And it's like, well, I can spin up a Signiant server, which will cost a minimum of $12,000 a year. I can use, Massive or something like that, which is great, but will cost $250 a terabyte, right? And then you start going like, oh my God, this is a big hassle. And by the way, this is why we created Beam Transfer to make this really simple. But I realized at the sort of tech level, I could use object storage itself as my conduit. So I could upload things to the infrastructure, the object storage itself, and then just download it on the other side. That's not necessarily what we're doing right now, but that was the sort of epiphany of like, there's this thing that's available to everyone. And then, we realize that there's another problem, which is most people think about the cloud like it's the ether of the everywhere place. I've uploaded it to the world, right? And that's not true. Clouds exist in data centers that are in specific locations. So if you are uploading, let's just say, stuff from New York to the US East region, which is in Virginia, I think, all that data is sitting in a data center in Virginia. Not everywhere, there, right? Which means if the power goes out in Virginia, you lose access, right? It also means that the farther away you get away from it, the slower everything gets because you can't change the speed of light. Believe me, we've tried. So everything becomes sort of less stable and becomes slower. So we caught this problem on one show that started in New York. We did like a 6-week shoot and then there was a 2-week pickup in Los Angeles. And we're like, why is uploading from LA half the speed of uploading from New York? Like, what is this? And we finally figured out, oh my God, it's because of these regions. So then we found this company, Storj, which I'm sort of plugging, so to speak. I'm a huge fan, evangelist, customer, everything. They basically created like a cloud 2.0. which was like, instead of uploading it to a region, you upload the file and it gets sharded into little chunks, and the chunks get distributed across a global network of over 20,000 points of presence. That's a technical way. The simple explanation is everything is fast everywhere, and there's only one region for the whole globe. So the second we discovered that, it was like, oh wow, we could build the whole Shadow Magic cloud infrastructure on top of that, and making a lot more efficient, and also less techy, right? Because I don't have to manage multiple regions. I don't have to figure out I got half the project here and half the project there, and how do I cross mingle this? So building on top of that, I started thinking to myself, like, okay, so how object storage is really great because it's compatible with a lot of other tools. So like there are asset managers, there are like tools like Cutting Room where you can edit in the cloud and give that to story editors and things like that. Okay, so this is really cool, but it's super nerdy. Like it's super techy, right? Like how do I make this more efficient? I think a lot of what we've been trying to do is how can I turn object storage into something that is user understandable and familiar. So we kind of did that with Beam Transfer, and then StorageA actually recently did that with this new product called Object Mount, which actually takes the cloud and mounts it on your desktop like a hard drive, like kind of similar to like a Lucid Link in a sense, except for that you're dealing with whole objects and object storage instead of the sharded proprietary environment. I feel like I'm going off the techie. And am I going too far?
No, I'm tracking with you. This is great. And just to like root it in current events a little bit, the AWS outage is one of the downsides of being confined to one region.
Precisely. And this is actually one of the things that, I mean, how much in media do you care about content security and availability? Like, you can't go down ever. It's like there's millions of dollars in those files, right? And you're responsible for them. You have your own, SLAs with your customers. So the cool thing about StorageA is if that region were to go down, we just pull it from the next closest nodes, and you wouldn't notice. So literally, like half a country can go offline, and you never go down. I say it's like you get the better, faster, cheaper triangle. Pick two. It's like, well, why not pick all three?
Yeah,
it's super obvious to me that like that's the foundation for us. Like that's the foundational layer of everything that we built on top of it. Let's do a little history thing of like how we got here, so to speak, and where we think it's going. Is that cool?
Yeah, love that.
So, not too long ago, I think we were all coming into facilities. And that's the brain of the facility was the SAN or the NAS, and everything that you'd build on, all the features of that facility would all be connected to shared storage, and then we'd all come in and we'd have all the things we need to do our post-production. Obviously, the pandemic accelerated this, but even beforehand, there were certain things that you need to get things in and out of that facility. You need to obviously be able to transfer files in and out. You need to be able to do like review and approve. You need to be able to maybe collaborate with another facility. Like all of these became sort of like point solutions, even archival. Like what if the building catches on fire, right? We need to have some sort of archive somewhere. So when we thought about the cloud, we thought about them in terms of point solutions. Like I'm going to hire a review and approve tool. I'm going to hire a archive tool. I'm going to hire a collaboration tool. And what that meant is you're basically uploading the same thing to lots of different places, and you're paying lots of different monthly fees from lots of different people. And I think that one of the new sort of trends here is, what if you didn't do that? What if you uploaded it to one single source of truth and then brought apps to the media that could connect to this open S3 standard, right? So instead of uploading to something like a Frame.io where everything lives in Frame.io, you are uploading to essentially StorageA, or you're uploading to a bucket, but another asset manager like Iconic or Mimmer or something like that, or Cutting Room or Object Mount or Beam Transfer can all point at the same bucket and read the same files at the same time. So your archive becomes your collaboration tool, becomes your review and approve tool, becomes your, there are tools like Axle AI that can like index everything and allow you to do like really complex search. Why can't they all just point at the same place as features of an ecosystem platform, rather than uploading separate things to separate platforms and then waiting for Frame.io to build the custom integration that you need to get it to the other thing, right? So I think that as a foundation, then you start to think about, well, what if I could house edit bays in the cloud, right? And what if that edit bay was attached to the same object storage, right? So I'm editing from my archive, right? Like what one of the biggest problems that when an edit is done is like, well, what do I do with this media? How do I archive it? Well, what if it was already there and you didn't have to? You just turn off that edit bay and everything. Yeah, right. So I think like as a philosophy, it's a philosophical statement about like how I see the cloud is I think a lot of the media tools like weren't really designed in this way, but I think they can be. And I think there's a fair amount of frustration with it. It's the reason why Michael Cioni created Strata and is starting to sell like Be Your Own Cloud. I think that's going to work for a lot of people, not for everyone, but it'll work for a lot of people. But he's pointing at the right problem. You're right. You're paying 15 monthly fees to 15 different platforms, and they don't all talk to each other. And actually, I'm kind of a small operation, so like, why do I even need to do that? I think there's a better way potentially of just making the cloud better and more purpose built in general. So obviously, like we're partnering really strongly with Storj and trying to build some tools on top of it, trying to build our workflow on top of that. I think you can already see from what I said about how we operate that like there's a lot of efficiency in what we're doing. We can offer this to others. We might soon be able to teach this to others. And I think it'll come in the form of a tool that looks very, very simple, very, very familiar, I don't need to learn anything. It just works.
Well, that's really exciting. We're a small post house that is, utilizing from anywhere of 5 to 10 different editors at a time across the nation and world, and shipping drives, working across Frame.io. Frame.io is full, so we're having to pay more, and the messiness of archiving and keeping things straight and all that is real. And it's a problem of the past in my mind. I'm like, we have the technology, we have the solutions, and it's just, I think, a matter of getting more awareness out there. Strata is really interesting, and I think you're right. It is pointing at the right problem, and there's also another way of looking at it too. That's what you're doing with Storj.
Absolutely, and like that solution. And you tell me if I'm going too off topic or on topic or whatever. But I think that solution will work very well for certain people, especially people for whom their house is their home base, and they can afford to have a computer that's always on, and that the project's uptime is guaranteed by you. If you were shooting a Nat Geo project on a boat in the middle of nowhere, you might not be able to be your own cloud, right? Or even if you had a long tail, post-production on even a small indie project or a feature film, you might not be able to guarantee the uptime for the whole show. And for that, and I think things more sort of up the totem pole, so to speak, or up the trough, or whatever metaphor is socially acceptable, is housing it in the cloud makes it guaranteed that everything will be accessible to everywhere at all times. And it will also guarantee maximum speeds everywhere in the world. Yeah, and I think we're also seeing, on the East Coast, Optimum is rolling out 8 gig fiber. AT&T has 5 gig fiber. Google has 8 and 10 gig fiber. Starlink is promising to have gigabit, in the next couple of years. Like, the biggest problem for cloud stuff is connectivity. And I think we're getting pretty close. Like, we're seeing the trend that this is going to be solved, or it's starting to be solved. I actually think if Starlink cracks the code, it's like, that's game over. That's like, you have a little dish for $50 a month that you can put on a boat, plane, train, or automobile. And, with the gigabit, it's like, that's it. We've solved this problem now and forever.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to bring up next, is like, talk to me about internet speeds and how that works into your vision of the future. Because what it sounds like with that is that's starting to get better than what speeds you would expect with working directly with an SSD. Mm-hmm. If we're starting to get gig and higher speeds, internet access.
So I mean, like we're seriously considering, and we might actually in the next few months move the operation or move the headquarters of the operation to Austin. And Austin has 8 gig Google Fiber like in your house, which is insane. That's about 900 megabytes per second. That's faster than most hard drives. Well, it's faster than almost all hard drives and faster than a lot of SSDs, right?
Yeah.
And that's just your access to the internet, right? That's ridiculous. And then when you get into, data centers and stuff like that, like imagine you have a computer that's sitting in a data center and the storage is sitting in the same data center, and there's a 25 gigabit connection inside the data center. You won't really notice whether stuff is local or whether it's in the cloud, which is really just a hard drive somewhere else. So once you get things into that environment, it can be unbelievably performative to the point where you might not even notice that it's not local to your computer, so to speak. Connectivity is definitely the main issue, and for our operations, we're not always pushing up the OCN every day. I mean, if there is a fiber line, we will, and we'll try to do that instant archive. But even with a modest connection, we can upload dailies. Like I keep telling people, like, oh yeah, it's going to take 2 hours or 3 hours to upload the dailies to the editor, and they're like, oh, that's a long time. I'm like, no, it's not. It's overnight. You guys are asleep. Oh. So we're still going to get it at 9 a.m. in the morning. Yep. Right. And it's like, that was like the office Wi-Fi with like 30 megs up. Right. So depending on how you organize your workflow and your thought process, you can optimize it for whatever kind of environment you need. There are people like Mr. Net. They do some good stuff. There's another company I think it's called Last Mile or First Mile that does like multi-bonded 4G, 5G, like have a router with like 18 SIM cards in it so that you can bond like multiple cellular connections. So there's a lot of like cool stuff like that. I am very much in the Occam's razor camp of like, the simplest solution is almost always better. And that's largely because filmmaking is really hard. Everyone is up against deadlines. Everyone's face down in the dirt trying to get the light in that perfect shot at the perfect thing. They don't always have time to write down a perfect report. They don't always have time to make everything perfect. By the skin of their teeth, they're making their day in the first place, right? And you don't want to be like, well, we can't start shooting unless we set up this set network first. It's like not hold for sound, hold for internet. It doesn't, it's like, so that becomes a big problem. And actually, to be honest, that's why Frame.io's camera to cloud is in my opinion not a very good solution for indie filmmakers. It's actually pretty decent for photography, but for indie filmmakers, it's actually kind of a drawback, because you need to have this piece of gear on that camera, this piece of gear specifically for your sound recorder. Then you need to have Teradek machines to sync the stuff up. Then you need to have internet and connectivity on set, all so that you could get exactly what you're getting at Video Village, or what editor is going to be like, cool, I have one more shot, now I can edit. No, it doesn't work that way. So I think reverse engineering your workflow based on like, what outcomes do you need? The editor needs to get everything in the morning. Okay, that's the mission. So I think of like those like camera to cloud solutions as largely like a solution desperately looking for a problem. So I think if you're really economical about what are you trying to achieve, what do you need to get done, and then what's the simplest path to get from A to B to C, you can take a lot of the complexity out of the equation. And every time you add complexity, you add a point of failure. If you look at like if you ever wanted to, I can walk you through what we do with a dailies workflow. I mean, it's simple. I mean, it's simple in terms of the tools and the handoffs and the stuff. Like, where we put energy into is the QC, the eyeballs, the syncing, the making sure that everything is perfect.
Yeah. What stories do you have of like users and customers and the type of time you've saved them, and what type of testimonies do you have from them?
I don't know if I can give exact metrics, but I can say "holy crap" is a typical response. I'm kind of in the business of no news is good news. Okay. You know what I mean? Like the usual response we got is, "I didn't think we'd be able to do this," or "I'm a week ahead in my edit because the stuff was prepped perfectly when it first came into editorial. When you have fast turnaround like that's a big deal. So when we give some stuff that is synced and colored and all ready to go, and the assistant editor can actually spend time assisting the editor, right, rather than logging and doing boring stuff like that. Not only does the editor get up to speed a lot faster, but the assistant editor can be working on filling in soundscapes, can be working on like actually assisting the editor and helping the movie. So we get a lot of feedback that's just like, thank you, you really bailed this out, or this is unbelievable. I didn't think we'd be able to afford this, or like that kind of stuff. But when we're in production, if the phone doesn't ring, we're doing a really awesome job.
Exactly. Yep. And I know a lot of people listening know exactly how that feels in this industry. Well, man, Jordan, this has not been like our typical episode. And I am really appreciative of you coming on and getting to like just totally nerd out on some ways that we can improve through the tools that you guys offer in our building, the post-production process. It's been really educational for me. And I'm excited to check you guys out. And so with that being said, like where can people check out what you guys are doing and maybe learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to shadowmagicstudios.com, although in a couple of weeks it'll be shadowmagic.com. There's a whole sort of rebrand coming. And for Beam Transfer, you can check out beamtransfer.io and reach out to me if you want to join the beta. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to get your valuable feedback. And thank you, Gavin. This is super fun. I love nerding out and geeking out, sometimes a little bit more than I should.
No.
But, look, at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is empower independent filmmakers to impact culture. That's our sort of mission statement in Shadow Magic. We really deeply believe in what we're doing and who we're helping. That's why I say it's like, I think of it as like the most selfish, selfless industry. I think we desperately need independent filmmakers. We definitely desperately need new ideas. And if you'll allow me 30 seconds, I have a quick hot take on AI, if you don't mind.
Let's hear it. Let her rip.
I think that the people who are scared that generative AI are going to come and take their jobs should be. And that's not AI's fault. It's yours. Because if you live in an industry that, like, what does AI do? It looks at everything done in the past and finds commonalities. So if you're in a business of making the same 4-chord pop song, it's going to figure out how to do that better. If you're in the business of doing the same exact story structure or regurgitating the same thing or doing remakes and reboots and stuff like that, it's going to figure that out. It's going to figure out the analytics better. It's going to figure out if you do this and this and this and this, you'll maybe be able to, I don't know, do that. What it can't do is create Bohemian Rhapsody if it had never heard it before. And what it definitely can't do is come up with your take on something. And that's what I am really passionate about. At the end of all of this tech talk, I really want people to make new and interesting, original, exciting, provocative films. Hopefully with Shadow Magic, if that's who you are, we as a production company, as a post-production company, as a lab services company, like we want to get in the trenches with you. We want to support you. And we desperately want to see a whole revolution of new and original, exciting, provocative storytellers be empowered to share a little bit of who they are with the world and share their vision.
Dang, mic drop.
Boom.
I love it. Thank you again so much for coming on here, and excited to see where you guys go. And let's chat again.
Oh, I'd love to, man. This is great. Super fun. Thank you.
Yep.